We're going to be talking about Constantine the Great tonight. And there is so much in the way of mythology around him. And I want to clear it all up as I usually do. I went ahead and created this talk using the majority primary sources from that time and then kind of stacking them all up and then putting together a narrative. So we're going to understand Constantine the Great from that time, from that perspective, along with, of course, my own interpretations of various materials. But there's a lot of myths, and Constantine gets blamed for quite a bit, and so much he just simply did not do. He did a lot of important things. Don't get me wrong, but he is not the one. I'll just start off. He's not the one that made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. That never happened, non-event. So let's just take care of that one right away. So I will tell you who did that. It's not Constantine. So another thing is Constantine did not decide the books of the Bible. That's also not true. More mythology, complete mythology, and we'll go into that. And he's not the one who made all the decisions at the Nicene Council. He didn't do that either. He was there, but he didn't make the decision. So there's another one. You know, there's so many of them. And so we're going to understand what he really was about: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, Margie, go ahead and show me with my friend Constantine the Great. I have a few pictures of me. I've been researching Constantine for quite a while. And there I am, a little bit of younger self with the monolithic statue of Constantine the Great. And I'm looking pretty happy there. I'm right next to his head and a part of his arm. Let's go to the next picture. There it is. So you can imagine how big this used to be. Many believe that much of it was made out of wood, and the parts that show the skin were made out of stone. Others say it was made out of other kinds of materials. But this does survive at the Capitoline Museum in Rome. Now, I want to go ahead and make a point. So let's show the next picture. And that's me making a point. Okay, I'm here all night. So there we okay, at least I think I'm funny. Okay, so yes, thank you so much. So temporarily we'll put that down. So you know, me and Constantine looks like we're buds. We hung out. He didn't say much. I also want to mention that I have actually published on Constantine the Great back in Sacred History Magazine, November, December 2006. So yeah, so I've done a lot of work on this individual. So there it is. There's my article there. Woohoo! It says right there, the conversion of state, and there's my name, James D. Rietveld. This is a fun article. Yeah. So yeah. So you're going to get some pretty cool information tonight, and a large portion of the photos happen to be my own. I actually did research on Constantine the Great in all places in Italy. So journeying around various places, putting together this article and a few other kinds of works. So there you have it. So I want to show the next image, and I want to show the Arch of Constantine. There is the Arch of Constantine. Just keep the image there. I'm going to go through this. This arch was dedicated in 313 CE. That's 313 CE, on the commemoration of the 10th anniversary. What happened is this monumental arch is made out of shimmering white marble and is actually a combination of old, carefully recycled materials integrated with newer elements, in essence, reflecting much of the personality of this really both resourceful and enigmatic ruler. But whether the relief panels originally came from monuments dedicated to the second century Emperor Trajan or Hadrian or Marcus Aurelius, or were actually sculpted in honor of the new emperor, the general theme of the Arch of Constantine is basically the same: victory in battle. But unlike the three emperors mentioned, who had, for the most part, waged campaigns against non-Romans, such as the Dacians, Constantine, he's here being honored for this particular victory against his fellow Romans, one specifically by the name of Maxentius, who he defeated at the Milvian Bridge just outside of Rome in 312 CE, a victory that gave him the undisputed control over the Latin west of the Roman Empire. So let's go to the next image. So many scholars and lay people alike recollect the story of what occurred just prior to this historical engagement, remembering how this was the occasion when Constantine had his remarkable vision, which subsequently converted him, it is said, I'll say it, subsequently supposedly converted him over to Christianity, an event dramatically altering the course of church-state relations. But you know, you would not know this, that this conversion ever happened by looking at the Arch of Constantine. In fact, you might even question the relevancy of the story itself, for the arch does not look very Christian. Let's go to the next image. So what needs to be remembered is that the Roman emperor, who had become the very embodiment of the state, was also designated. He was called a Pontifex Maximus. Remember that. He's called a Pontifex Maximus. A Pontifex Maximus is the head of the Roman public religion. This Roman public religion incorporated the full set of the Olympian gods and others besides, including the goddess Victory. Constantine, during his entire reign, did not give up the title of Pontifex Maximus. In fact, in the eyes of the Senate and the Roman people, he was still, this is important, you got to know this, still the top religious official working within a system initially created to serve the gods of Rome. In one panel on the arch, which we're looking at, the Emperor Trajan in full battle regalia was shown receiving the crown of victory from the goddess Victory, as the goddess's honor and virtue stood nearby. The sculptor had no problem reshaping Trajan's head as Constantine's own, and apparently neither did Constantine, who gave the final approval for this monument that was offered by the Senate. Other panels, which originated originally from the time of Hadrian, reveal the public sacrifice to the deities Apollo and Diana and Hercules and Sylvanus. Let's go to the next one. Wow, look at that. Take a look at that. Amazing. The principal figure acting as Pontifex Maximus, once Hadrian, is once again refashioned into Constantine. But one may ask, surely the newer portions of the arch reflect Constantine's new religious orientation? Well, one would think, but this is not the case. In fact, the majority of the newer decorative features upon the arch display everything from victory goddesses to river deities reclining upon lateral archways. This is not, I repeat, this is not an arch dedicated to a Christian emperor. Let's go to the next one. As you can see for yourself, it's definitely not. Go to the next one. So, yes. Oh, there. Look at that. So, there's goddesses here and there and everywhere. Okay, good. Thank you, Margie. I think that really makes makes the point. As for the inscription from the Arch of Constantine, it likewise is non-committal. It declares as follows. It says, this is what the Arch says. To the Emperor Caesar Flavius Constantius, the greatest, pious, and blessed Augustus, because he, inspired by the divine and by the greatness of his mind, has delivered the state from the tyrant, that being Maxentius, and all of his followers at the same time, with his army and just forces of arms. The Senate and the people of Rome have dedicated this arch. Decorated, it continues, with triumphs. So what? So we take a look at this. Note the reference to being inspired by the divine on the inscription, with no direct mention of Christianity here. The inscription on the Arch of Constantine merely follows earlier precedents. For the early Roman emperors also appealed to the idea of the divine, even as recently as the Emperor Diocletian, who held a polytheistic worldview. The Romans had come to believe that behind the multiplicity, many of them, they believe that there's still a singularity. Hence, the appeal was often to Jupiter, father of the gods. Now, the mention here, divinitas, was referring to any divinity within. For example, in the Roman ancestor cult, they revere the divinity of their ancestors as inspiring them. So, for the Romans, when you saw this arch, no real change of format here, just a status quo inscription. And what about the famous Battle of the Milvian Bridge, so boldly portrayed in one of the relief panels? Well, the inscription upon the Arch of Constantine does indeed honor the emperor in his various engagements, including this one, that's the one he supposedly converted over to Christianity, declaring that he, quote, avenged the state against the tyrant in rightful battle. And of course, as a result of his, again, divine inspiration and his own great spirit. Extincto divinitatis mentis mognitatem, right? Woo. So, as mentioned, right, this is not a direct reference to a Christian God. Some scholars have surmised that perhaps the vagueness of this designation, exactly which divinity was doing the inspiration, was some kind of idea connected to conversion. But again, other emperors before had dedications that were also vague. So just the fact that it's vague doesn't mean that it's referring to Christianity, because other emperors were just as vague in their references going all the way back. And perhaps the Roman Senate wished Constantine's new religious persuasion not to appear upon the arch, or they were not informed about the details, or even at all, but still the arch stands. Now, for the story of Constantine's conversion, we have to move from sculpture to script, and in particular to Christian writers by the name of Lactantius and Eusebius. What a great name, Lactantius, right? The version by Lactantius dates back to 315 CE, which is, close to the time when the arch was dedicated, concerning the event just prior to his battle for Rome, leading up to his defeat of Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge. Lactantius states as follows. I'm going to read Lactantius. He says, Constantine was advised in a dream to mark the heavenly sign of God on the shields of the soldiers and then engage in battle. He did as he was commanded, and by means of a slanted letter X or Chi, with the top of its head bent round, he marked Christ on their shields. So that's what Lactantius says. They had a dream to mark the heavenly sign of God on the shields of his soldiers to engage a battle. So this is the idea that, you need this sign to win the battle against Maxentius so you can take the city of Rome. This will happen at the Milvian Bridge, and then as a result, take over the western half of the Roman Empire. Now, many argue that Constantine was instructed to place the Greek letters chi and rho upon their shields, which is the first two letters of the name of Christ in Greek. Well, the story is definitely early, and it does originate from someone who did know Constantine pretty well. In fact, Lactantius was not only a famous rhetorician, but also his oldest son's tutor. So you would know, right? Yet, by reading the description in Latin, transversa ex littera sumno capta cum flexo, by reading this configuration is not exactly a hero, right? What it is, it also fits, hold your breath, the double axe symbol of Zeus. The actual monogram, however, of hero was already minted on coins issued by Constantine as early as 315. So only 3 years after the battle. So it seems like perhaps it's a hero, but we're not fully sure. The second story of the Milvian Bridge moment of conversion, supposed conversion, you'll see that it's not what we think, originates from Eusebius, and it was written in 337, just 1 year prior to Constantine's death, and it goes as follows. About the time of the midday sun, when the day was just turning, he said that he saw with his own eyes up in the sky and resting over the sun a cross-shaped trophy formed from light and a text attached to it that said, "By this sign, conquer." Amazement at the spectacle both seized him and the whole company of soldiers who was then accompanying him on a campaign and witnessed the miracle. So that's from Eusebius, right? So it's like, okay, so of course, this is many years later, and Constantine's not long for this life. I do see a little bit of embellishing here, but let's go into this. In Latin, by this, the idea, the word sign is actually inferred, conquer. It is hoc vicus, by this sign, which is the sign of maybe the cross, conquer. As a result of this mystical vision, Constantine believed the sign could be used as protection against the attacks of the enemy. Since, as Eusebius says, what comes from God's assistance is irresistible and invincible. So basically, Constantine sees this sign and he goes, okay, this is a sign from God that this is how I'm going to win the battle. Okay. Yet, the historical validity of this count is still not agreed upon. You guys ready? For as often as reasoned, why did Lactantius fail to mention this episode? Why is this missing? Also, there is a panegretic known as the Panegretic Latini, presents a similar story. Yeah. In fact, this story, which involves Constantine the Great, takes place in Gaul, which is modern France, 2 years prior to the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, in the year 310. It was on this occasion, just before a battle against the Franks, either near Trier or Autun, where there was a declaration, "For, O Constantine," I'm quoting from it, "For, O Constantine, you saw, I believe, your protector Apollo in company with victory, offering you laurel crowns." Unquote. While this pagan source also refers to a great solar vision, complete with a radiating halo effect. The center of the vision was not the cross, it was the god Apollo. The god Apollo, not the cross of Christ. 3 years, same guy, 3 years before the Milvian Bridge story. Oh boy. Of course, Apollo is connected to the sun too. Ooh. I think things just got complicated. What must be understood now, here we go, is that Constantine was a well-known worshiper of Sol Invictus. Sol Invictus. This is the unconquerable sun, as in the sun in the sky. In fact, after 311, Constantine minted Soli Invictu Comedi on his coins, revealing his special dedication to the sun. In fact, the coinage was a very efficient means to spread official propaganda. These coins often commemorated his various military victories, attributing these victories to the power of Sol Invictus. Yeah, he's giving Sol Invictus the credit. Anyone who handled the money in various regions where these coins were minted would instantly know Constantine's god as the god that connects to the sun. Some of his own troops, even called themselves the Solensis. Constantine's connection then to Apollo, the god connected also to the sun at times, is then not unexpected, for this deity personified the force he was devoted to in worship. It must be noted that on the Arch of Constantine, in the dedication as I mentioned, in 313, Apollo appears in 2 highly visible places. Sorry, 315. So Constantine's affiliation with this god was fairly recognized by the Senate and general public. The proclamation of Constantine as a companion of the sun, as Sol Invicto Comedi, is continually minted on his coins, all the way to 320. So he just continues for the next 7 years. It's on his coins. Christ is not on the coins. Sol Invictus is. Oh, you're going, this talk just is really interesting. I mean, remember, this is money that's minted. Everybody's handling this money. This is very public. Think of our money today. You know, people handling that. People are seeing this on their coinage. Some even declare that Constantine himself was the sun. For example, he was declared as the sun in the mountaintop city of Termissus in Pisidia. And of course, I've been there. I've journeyed up there. It's pretty cool. It's this beautiful city up in the mountains, and there's forest all around. So Constantine, he was a product of an age where syncretism was not only part of religious beliefs, but expected. For example, early on, the Roman gods amalgamated with the Greek gods, being seen as the same deities with their attributes combined. Eventually, Greco-Roman deities were seen as connected to specifically Egyptian and Syrian and Persian gods. And while Zeus and Jupiter and Amun-Ra may have different names, they were often viewed as merely aspects of one god. Pagan monotheism often centered around Zeus or Jupiter, but it also centered around the sun. The cult of Mithras was very popular amongst the soldiers in Constantine's time. They centered their devotion and rituals upon the sun and worship specifically. Guess when those who were Mithras worshippers, guess when they celebrated? Of course, they celebrated on Sunday. They worshipped on Sunday, and so did Constantine. Constantine also, we know, celebrated his Sol Invictus on Sunday. Okay. Oh, by the way, and their major holiday was the winter solstice, which was celebrated typically between the 23rd to 24th or 25th of December. 25th of December. Does this sound familiar? Oh, you're having epiphanies. Like, wow, we thought this was a Christian change. It turns out it's the sun change. Constantine then believed his devotion to the sun, or better said, the invincible divine and abstract power that the sun merely represented. So he doesn't believe that the sun itself is that power, but he believes that it represents this higher power, could manifest under many names, whether Sol Invictus, Apollo. And by the way, you'll see another direct connection to Apollo later on when he founds Constantinople with the statue of Apollo holding the cross of Christ. Ooh, we'll go there later. The sun deity of Mithraism, and yes, of course, even Jesus Christ. Now we got to understand, let's go a little back history on this. This idea of connecting Jesus with the sun, S-U-N, goes pretty far back even within Christian circles. And I'm going to drop names because this is a primary source kind of talk. So Clement of Alexandria, one of my favorites, depicts Christ riding his sun chariot across the skies, much like Apollo. Tertullian, in the early 3rd century, noted how many pagans believed Christians worship the sun. For after all, they prayed towards the east in the direction of the rising sun, and they often worshiped on Sundays. This is what Christians are moving from Saturdays, which is the Jewish celebration day, to Sundays. A lot of people thought this is a connection to the sun. In popular art and sculpture, Jesus was made to resemble a young and beardless Apollo. In the early 4th century, a Christian tomb that's located below St. Peter's Basilica, which I have seen. I've been under St. Peter's Basilica, and whoa, I shouldn't have brought that picture. Oh well. It portrays Jesus as Sol rising up in a chariot. By the time of Constantine, Jesus Christ was proclaimed as Sol Justitii, as the Sun, Son of Righteousness. Who says this? Even Eusebius says this. Okay. As evidence here, it was only natural for Constantine then to associate his god Sol with Jesus Christ. Following his reign, the sun continued to represent Christ, if you're curious. For example, a coin from Vetriano, dated around 350, is inscribed with the words Sol Invictus, with the Labarium, a Christian standard, crowning it, as late as the papacy of Leo the Great, who was Pope. This is 440 to 461. Many pagans were still, this is the 440 to 461. This is Leo the Great. I want to make sure you hear this. This is important. Many pagans were still sacrificing before a statue of Constantine at Constantinople, as if they were a representation, as if it was a representation of the sun or Sol himself. Obviously, Leo chastised those who continued this practice, but it is in evidence that Constantine's association with the sun continued long after his death, over 100 years after his death. Furthermore, Leo also corrected his own congregation for devoting themselves to a ritual for the sun upon the steps of St. Peter's before they entered the church to worship. So even in his day, in the 400s, they're going, well, we've got to make sure we revere the sun. Oh, whoa. Okay, so there you have, right? So regardless of his reputation as a worshiper of the sun, the Eusebian version of the story of his conversion in 312 before the Milvian Bridge, as written in 337, is still of major importance. Whatever the verdict of his earlier religious convictions, for Jesse represents Constantine's predominant belief that earthly power for any ruler is only secure if a deity, in this case, the Christian God, permits it, right? These signs and visions, whether valid or fabricated, served a rhetorical purpose, a proof text, so to speak, legitimizing his imperial power as sanctioned by god or a power. Once more, this was a prevalent view of many emperors before him. The only difference in this case was that Constantine owed his terrestrial power, it is said, to a Christian deity rather than the gods of tradition, rather than the Roman pantheon. However, one can argue he is looking at this god as amalgamated with his own belief in Sol Invictus as this God who is the sun. By default, the God of the Christians became official in a state sense through him because he was the head of the Roman religion. Naturally, this also meant that with Constantine's conversion, Christians gained a chief executive with official power to elevate their status over those devoted to the traditional gods of Rome. After all, he was the head of state too. So it is under Pontifex Maximus that the Christians gain recognition, right? Gain recognition. Now, I want to show some pictures of the Milvian Bridge. So, Margie, just want to go ahead and show that. It'll be kind of fun. I visited the Milvian Bridge. There it is. Ta-da! That's my picture of the Milvian Bridge. That is near Rome, where this great battle occurred. Let's go to the next picture. There I am. That's me. So there I'm at the Milvian Bridge. Actually, it's heavier there than I am now. So I'll go to the next one. And you can see, oh, look. There's one of those coins I was talking about. That doesn't look like Jesus. Okay. I think that's, let's go to the next one. I think that's the last one of those, of that series there. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we'll save that for next time. Good. Thank you. So you get my point. So, okay. Nothing like seeing physical evidence. Almost immediately after defeating Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge, he was thrown into the Tiber, never to be found again. Constantine went to meet the then co-emperor Licinius in 313. Remember, at this time, the Roman Empire is divided between two emperors. Constantine's now the emperor of the western part of the Roman Empire, and a certain Licinius is the emperor of the eastern side of the Roman Empire. And so they decide they're going to meet together. And they meet at Milan. Milan is kind of like the center orbit in many ways. In fact, more and more, the emperors spend time in Milan throughout the 4th century. They leave Rome as just too full of intrigue. So eventually the imperial capital happens to be Milan. So, and of course, when I did my research and all this, I went to Milan too. But anyway, one of the main topics brought up between these two emperors at Milan concerned religious toleration. This is going to change everything. This is a big moment. Religious toleration, especially in relation to the Christians. The result was what is often referred to as the Edict of Milan. The Edict of Milan, even though it's circulated mostly in the eastern provinces. While it is true that the decision at Milan resulted in the state decision to protect Christians, the general conclusion was the freedom of worship granted to all. Did you hear me? That's right. Freedom of worship granted to all, Christians and non-Christians alike. This is never talked about. Nobody knows this. People, oh, Constantine's wanted to make Christianity an official religion. No, he didn't. Under the role of Pontifex Maximus, he's head of the Roman religion, which now is inclusive of Christianity, but as well as the original state religion as well. But let's go further. I want more evidence. Let's do that. As for the reference to the deity in this document, in direct contrast to the previous reign, of Diocletian, that being. He's famous for the persecution against Christians, where he happened to mention Jupiter and Hercules were often invoked. General terms were now applied in this document. So they were, according to the document, they were now meant to appease, you'll like this, quote, whatever deity there is in the seat of heaven, unquote. Whatever deity there is in the seat of heaven, unquote. Quid est divinitatis in sede celesti. It's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As for his policy towards those outside the church following the Edict of Milan in 313, some scholars believe he actively and officially discriminated against them to the point of persecution, while others assert that his approach was indeed moderate and that the evidence has been misread in many ways. For instance, although he did issue some laws, here we go. I'm going to go in here because so we have people who say, "Oh, he's still going to all for the Christians." No, I'm going to tear up that argument right now. You guys ready? Here we go. Oh, you're going to love this. Here we go. So, I'll go slowly. So, for his policy towards those outside the church following the Edict of Milan, right? Some scholars believe he actively and officially discriminated against them to the point of persecution, while others assert that his approach was indeed moderate and that the evidence has been misread in many ways. Oh, yeah, but I want you to see how it's misread. Okay. For instance, although he did issue some laws that restricted traditional religion, mandating an act against magical practices in 318, listen up, and enforcing regulations against divination between 319 and 320, on closer inspection, it turns out that with the first act, Constantine, because I went through it myself, looked through the document, Constantine forbade against what was labeled as bad magic or bad acts, bad actions, right? So as we see, so it's Malficia, which we see later on in the Middle Ages, right? Bad actions. These actions, he's restricting those actions that was directed against people's lives and but he permitted in the very same document what we could translate as good magic, meant to secure the crops and the good health of the emperor. So you can it's forbidden to do bad acts, but it's not forbidden to do good acts. Wow. And guess it's Constantine's not the first one to do it. No, other emperors have done this before. He's not the first. This is just ridiculous. It's not a Christian thing. It's an emperor thing. Okay, let's keep going. As for the law against divination, you'll like this. They were only applied to practices in private settings. In this edict, Constantine proclaims, quote, this is what he said, "We do not forbid," said the emperor, "the observance of the old usages in the light of day," unquote. Of course, if one violated this edict, the penalties were quite severe, as they would be in the past in typical Roman fashion. It says, "Whoever by entreaty or promise of payment persuaded a haruspux to break this law, that man's property should be confiscated and he himself should be burned to death." Ooh. Again, this was to ensure the safety of the state and especially himself. For what if they predicted his sudden and violent death? Private divination often planted the seeds of sedition. And were these laws revolutionary? No. You know who did it? They've been passing these laws, here we go, since the first century. Since the first century, emperors have been passing these laws because they don't want people to read in their downfall in private. Then they start plotting. They did this in the first century. They did this in the second century. They did this in the third century. Constantine, and people will say, oh, look, he's doing it. No, he's not. He's not. That's called mythology. Is this helpful? Complete mythology. Typical Roman emperor doing what Roman emperor does. Are you guys waking up now? Yeah, you love the spin. Yeah, you're stuck with somebody who actually reads the primary sources and goes through the inscriptions in the original language. Let's keep going. Another edict issued in 320 to city prefects are quite illuminating of Constantine's religious policies at the time, with this law asserting that if lightning should strike a public building, or especially the imperial palace itself, they were directed to seek out the haruspices according to ancient custom, to see what the portents were, what actions the lightning signified at that time and place. Following the questioning of the diviners, the information was to be immediately reported to Constantine. That's pagan. That's really, yeah, what year? 320. He's been emperor for a while. Here, Constantine, as Pontifex Maximus, as head of the Roman religion, is not only publicly displaying himself as very involved in ancient Roman beliefs, do you see that? But revealing himself as relying upon them for his own personal safety. How much of this is based upon public rhetoric is not the point, for regardless of his personal views, the emperor is here presenting himself in a manner in conflict with the understood Christian doctrine of the clergy. Furthermore, as late as 337, just prior to his death, Constantine confirmed all the rights. 337, Constantine confirmed all the rights and privileges of the pagan priesthood, reasserting their equal status to Christian clergy and their overseership of their vast properties. What? But I thought he got rid of it. No, mythology. You mean all the way to his death, he's supporting letting pagans worship? Yes. Yes. Does anybody read the sources anymore? So look at all the urban legends that are just falling apart today. This is great. You loving it? Let's keep going. Oh, we're going to keep going. Following the Edict of Milan, with the proclamation of Christianity as now a protected religion. By the way, you'll be interested to know that also as a protected religion with the Edict of Milan was Judaism. Just throwing that one in there. All the religions. Yeah. Okay. Now, so what happens now is, where was I? As protected as any other religion is protected by the Roman emperor, and not just Constantine, but Licinius too, who was undeniably pagan to the end of his days. However, the Christian clergy immediately did gain a series of rights and privileges. Again, many scholars have pointed out that this is a display of Constantine's favoritism. And again, these actions were to be expected, but because with the pagan and Christian clergies as equals, the Christian clergy by default would gain the same rights as official pagan clergy. So the pagan clergy, they're not losing any rights. It's just that the Christian clergy is getting the same rights, not over the pagan clergy, the same guaranteed rights, because again, Constantine's Pontifex Maximus, he's head of the Roman religion. And so Christianity is falling under his envelope as he sees it, as well as the public religion. But he doesn't exclude the public religion. Got it? Okay, so what happens now is that, for example, immediately following the Edict of Milan, the church gained the right of full immunity for their clergy, which was inclusive of freedom from compulsory service in the military and other public offices, such as the curial office, and of course, they didn't have to pay taxes. And you're going, see, the Christians are now tax-free. Well, guess what? Of course, the pagan clergy also already had these privileges, and other groups, such as the Jews, who also received protected status under the Edict of Milan, also gained privileges necessary for the observance of their religious beliefs. In fact, the Jewish community gained many exemptions and freedoms at this time in general. Wow. And legal jurisdictions. Well, this guy is not so bad off. No, he's not as bad as he's. They get Constantine mixed up with Theodosius the First, which is way later. But anyway, here we go. Constantine. Let's go to the next one. Here's another big reveal. This is earth shattering. Constantine declared that Sunday was under the protection of the Roman state. Sunday, and he himself as the Pontifex Maximus. He says this day was officially proclaimed as a day of rest and a day to worship. He understood whatever God or gods one personally believed in. He means an official day for the worship of any God that yes, not just a Christian God. No, it's Sunday, Sol Invictus. When was this decision made? Oh, I'll give you the exact date. Sunday became this day on March 3rd, 321. How's that for exact? March 3rd, 321. So while Christians did celebrate Sunday in the Latin West, as opposed to the Greek East, where many still observe, by the way, Saturday, the Sabbath, but so did many other pagan groups, including, of course, the followers of the cult of Mithras. For Constantine, as a worshiper of Sol Invictus, a day set aside for his worship of the unconquerable sun was to be expected. In fact, Constantine never mentions Sunday ever as the day of the Lord. In fact, he refers to Sunday as, this is what he says the day is about, the everlasting day of the soul, of the sun, unquote. You mean it's a day for, it's 321. Is he already going to Christianity? No. He doesn't get baptized as a Christian until his death, on his deathbed. How are we doing? Oh, man. As for the expected practices on this day, his edict declared, quote, I'm reading from his edict, because nobody ever does, right? On this venerable day of the sun, in English, of course, S-U-N, but it's S-O-L, let the magistrates and the people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed. In the country, however, persons engaged in agriculture may freely and lawfully continue their pursuits, because it so often happens that another day is not suitable for grain sowing or vine planting. That's very nice of him, right? Lest by neglecting the proper moment for such operations, the bounty of heaven should be lost. Wow. Now, according to Eusebius, Constantine asked the people to go out into nature. Wow. Lift their hands to heaven and to pray to whatever God they chose with a prayer that he recommended. And so here is the prayer that he recommends. We acknowledge you alone as, like, fill in, God and King, which could be any God or King. We call upon you as our helper. From you have we received the victory. By you we have overcome the foe. To you we owe that good which we have received up to now. From you do we hope for in the future. To you we offer up our entreaties and implore thee that you will preserve to us our Emperor Constantine and his God-fearing sons for many years uninjured and victorious, unquote. Such a move then was not favoritism to Christianity, but actually a move to encourage the public equality of all the religious beliefs. And we know that for a fact. That people went out, all different religions, and they go, what overriding God do we worship? And sometimes it'll be Zeus, sometimes it will be Jupiter, Sometimes it'll be Amon Ra. Are you guys following this? Right? And most of all, he just wants people to pray for him. Just pray for me, whatever belief you have. This is 321. While Constantine permitted the imperial cult to continue, he did. With him presided as Pontifex Maximus, he did refuse. This is some changes in me. He did refuse the traditional sacrifices made in his honor, fearing that if he did so, Christians and Jews would feel their faith was compromised. I think that was interesting. He did this not just for the Christians, but the Jews too. With that said, Constantine still permitted the imperial cult to declare his divinity. It's still okay to call me divine. And so I call the altars dedicated to him holy. He said that's okay. And to assert that both his palace and inner chambers were sacred. So that's a little change. Although certain Christians may have had reservations for the retention of such displays of divinity, other Christians reinterpret such actions as being willed by God. For after all, through Constantine, the church was now free of persecution, recognized, free to flourish, and were protected under Roman law. That's what they gained. Many said he was like an angel of God from the Old Testaments. Others proclaimed that he was a typology, like a son of God, so that as Jesus, the Son of God, was in his heavenly court, so Constantine, a son of God in his earthly court, reflected the magnificence of above. And who said this? Eusebius. Okay. I want more details. I'm giving you more details. One interesting measure, there was a law Constantine established in 318 that gave a Christian the legal right to appeal to a Christian bishop when called to appear before a civic court, if and only agreed by both parties. So the person, call it a civic court, if both parties agreed that they want to meet in a Christian court, Constantine said that was okay. Furthermore, even if the civil court was already hearing the case, jurisdiction could be transferred. Now listen up. While Constantine's view of Christianity had significantly changed, this does not mean that the views of others did the same. We must remember that as recently as the previous Roman Emperor Diocletian, these very same courts were sentencing Christians to death. So they're kind of nervous. Many Christians were nervous about being tried under the same courts, feeling that they may not receive a fair trial. Now, the curious factor is that under Roman law, one's Christian ethics did not play any part in the trial. So that if one did transfer their case from a Roman to a Christian court, the accused may actually receive a harsher judgment because now their morality is being judged too. Naturally, trials in a Christian court saved the Roman state lots of money, a greatly needed benefit after the fall of the economy under the previous regime. Still, this act did create a precedent that would be expanded upon. For example, Constantine established a law in 333 that further enforced that a bishop's testimony should be considered sufficient by all judges, and no witnesses was to be summoned after a bishop has testified. So, yeah, but this is, again, sure, money saver. Perhaps the greatest influence of Christianity upon Constantine was in relation to moral legislation. Oh, here we go, ramping up. So here we go. So this is where moral legislation, Christianity is going to influence him there, and all these terrible things he's going to do. Yeah, let's listen up. Roman society was very patriarchal. And while various Roman emperors did what they could to improve the day-to-day living situations of both women and children, most notably, of course, obviously Trajan, with his legislation regarding orphans, Roman law still remained pretty harsh. Yet concurrently, Christians had championed the rights of both women and children within their own personal spaces. This is before everything gets messed up later on in this century, but this is the early church, creating a social infrastructure that helped feed and house the orphans and the widows, as well as others in need. Although many in the second century many of the Roman emperors, influenced by Stoicism, established laws making it forbidden, for example, to expose unwanted children, expose them to die, right? This Roman custom proved almost impossible to end, exposing babies. Yet more and more, Christians took in these babies and adopted them into their own families because they viewed such actions as exposing children on the street as more than getting rid of their child. They viewed it as murder. Rather than issue another edict forbidding the exposure of children, since the laws were already on the books, other Roman emperors said this is bad too. Pagan emperors said this is bad too. It's not a Christian thing. Constantine simply enforced the rights of those who found those exposed babies, giving them full rights to take them in, care for them, and raise them. Those who gave up their babies in this way lost all rights to take them back as a penalty for their harsh action. Constantine then, much like his policy concerning his allowance for cases to be heard by a Christian bishop instead of a civic court, if it was expressed the wish to be, was basically focusing upon a Christian infrastructure to share the burden of responsibility. The Christians want to take care of that. Let them take care of that. It saves us money. Again, the Roman state was not financially well off as they were a century before, and such actions saved them money. Unfortunately, not all those who found the babies were charitable souls, having purely Christian motives in mind, selling these babies as slaves and securing extensive profits. Some parents even took to selling their children to get out of debt. This abuse continued until the Emperor Justinian, who closed this loophole in the 5th century. Beyond enforcing the right of ownership of those who found the babies left to exposure, Constantine also created asylums, or what could be called orphanages, for unclaimed babies so that no child would ever be left on the streets for very long. Don't you think this is kind of good moral legislation? What do you think? Wow. We didn't know. Of course you don't know. Nobody ever told you. Let's keep going. Constantine was the first Roman emperor to legislate. Now, he's the first now. Oh, so we have now a real first for moral legislation. Let's hear what it is. Constantine was the very first Roman emperor to legislate against the abduction of girls. What? He legislated against the abduction of girls, which is a common crime in the Roman Empire, whereby a girl was taken away while young and raised to become a prostitute. He was so against this. He thought this was so wrong. I think this is wrong too. Both the abductor, according to this law, both the abductor and those who assisted them were to be severely punished. If it was discovered that a maid servant assisted in the abduction of her mistress, her own mistress, Constantine prescribed that molten lead be poured down her mouth. He's really against this, and really helped stop this practice of abduction of these girls to become prostitutes. In fact, he said, let's protect women more. You mean his moral legislation is all about protecting women? Yeah, because at this time, before Christianity, a large portion of Christians at this time were women. In fact, the majority were still women. You just didn't know that either. In an attempt to protect women, Constantine also made divorce laws more stringent, as the husbands no longer had sole power within the marital relationship. He ended that. Constantine mandated that divorce was only legal if agreed upon by both parties. But if they did not agree, no divorce was to be recognized by the state. Now, however, there's a loophole. A man could divorce his wife against her will if it was proven that she was, number one, committing adultery, Number two, if she was caught attempting to poison him, that seems understandable. She's poisoning me. And third, if she was caught pandering or prostituting herself to other men. But by the way, I want to mention that if he is doing the adultery, she could also call in the same for him. So it's still equal. In these cases only could he then commence divorce proceedings on his own without her consent. If the charges were found valid, the divorce was finalized and he was able to keep her dowry. If, however, he decided to divorce her beyond the following three reasons, he just wants to divorce her and he doesn't, it's not these three reasons, he had to not only return her dowry, but he was also never allowed to marry again. Now, if, Constantine says, if, however, he did indeed marry again, his ex-wife was then permitted to enter his house and take all his new wife's possessions away, inclusive of the new bride's dowry. It's like, oh, you married again? And here comes the ex-wife. She's coming in and she's taking all the new wife's stuff, including all the money. Wow. Did he do anything else? Yeah. Following a moral precedent established by Christians, Constantine attempted to curtail abuses of slavery. He has problems with slavery. And he created legislation that helped diminish their ranks for the eventual dissolution of this class altogether. He hoped that slavery would end. He made it publicly known that he wished for masters to emancipate their slaves. He said, I wish you would just get rid of your slaves. It's not right. Of course, he did not directly free the slaves, for their freedom was only permitted via legal procedure. But then in 321 CE, Constantine issued a rather clever law whereby he gave the power of manumission, previously held by the state, to the church. You see where this happens. In this case, if a person happened to own slaves and be a Christian at the same time, his bishop now could invoke his right of manumission and force the master to free his slaves under the precedent of its immorality. So all these Christians are all, oh, great. We converted, now we lose all, yeah, you lose your slaves. The bishop just, this happened a lot. This is, haven't you wondered why slavery starts to diminish quite a bit during the 4th century? Who's the guy that started that? That is Constantine. It becomes less and less of a class. Next, Constantine ended corporal punishment of slaves. If a master tortured his slaves using various devices, they were punished as if they were torturing someone who was not a slave. The master was only permitted to use a rod and never to inflict damage, permanent damage. Again, he was liable in the court of law. If the slave did cause an offense, an actual crime, the master could send the slave to prison like anyone else. If the master intentionally killed his slave, he was charged with murder and received a trial as any other murderer, and if found guilty, he was put to death. So if you killed your slave, guess what? And it's proven, you get to die. Whoa. All right, see some things here? All right, let's keep going. In fact, Constantine, even though remember the molten lead down the throat, still, in general, unless for the severest crimes, Constantine found torture repugnant and not only proved the lives of slaves, but even those charged of crimes in general. Here we find much of Christian influence for determining that the face of humanity, he said, fashioned after the face of God, criminals were no longer permitted to be branded in the face. The only place permissible was the branding on the feet. What is often now, so let's take another one. Let's take another mythology. Constantine goes around and he destroys all these pagan temples. Oh, they're all gone, right? Yeah. So he goes around and he destroys 5. 5? 5. Who says so? Sin, Michael Grant, and of course the primary sources at that time. What is often claimed is that Constantine had a policy of intentionally destroying various pagan temples, but in reality, only 5 are mentioned. The temples of Aphrodite in the cities of Heliopolis. Let's go to my pictures here. Heliopolis. So what you see, the temple of Aphrodite at Heliopolis. There it is. He destroyed this one. Let's go to the next picture. We can see it. There it is. It's still standing, but he destroyed it. The next one after that. This is what it looked like. However, having said that, the evidence is that this temple didn't stay destroyed for very long. It was in continual use until the 5th century, for another 100 years. So didn't really accomplish that. But this was a temple that was dedicated to Aphrodite, or Astarte. Why did he destroy this temple? Because it had prostitution. Had sacred prostitution in it. Specifically, a lot of underage girls were being prostituted. Remember the underage stuff? And he thought this was wrong. I think this is wrong. I get it. So this is destroyed because of that reason. Got it? Next one. He destroyed the next picture. This is beautiful. This is the temple region of Venus, or Aphrodite, at Aphaka, which is in Lebanon today. Isn't that beautiful? It's built along a river, a stream. Take a look at the next picture. Yeah, beautiful. I like to visit that. And he destroyed the temple of Venus, or Aphrodite, at Jerusalem. But there's a reason why he destroyed that temple. So let's take a look at the next one. You see, Christians had a sacred site here. One place that we have recorded in early Christian writings in the 2nd century. So this is interesting. Christians did have places of veneration in Jerusalem. And one was the tomb of Jesus, and the other was where Jesus was believed to be crucified. And you can see that they were pretty close to one another. So what happens is that is the Emperor Hadrian builds in the 130s a temple dedicated to Aphrodite on top of it. So let's get to the next picture. And you can see here's the temple of Aphrodite. And he intentionally built this on top of the Christian holy site. You know, Constantine didn't think that was too cool. And it's not, because it is, it was originally a very important site to Christians before it was rededicated to Aphrodite. There is no background of Aphrodite worship there beforehand. So this is Hadrian just being Hadrian. So Constantine does have this demolished. Go to the next picture. And builds on top of it the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this is kind of what it looked like at that time. And so he, as Pontifex Maximus, can decide, to build a church here. Let's look at the next one. So this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now we're on my pictures. Do you like that? That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today, as it stands. Part of it's from the time of Constantine, but most of it's a little bit. A little part's Constantine, but not much. A little bit is from Justinian, and then the Crusades. A lot of it was destroyed by Al-Hakam and rebuilt. But there you have it. Let's look at the next picture. And so we got. So this is, of course, the Crusader part. Let's take a little journey here of the site that. So we go in through the next picture, shows the entranceway. That, of course, part of it is there's my friend Jim Schrader right there. We go in there, go to the next picture. It's like a slideshow. This is the supposed tomb of Jesus that is now under the Greek Orthodox, under their administration, and they're part of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Go to the next picture. These are all my photos. This is the guy that was watching it at one of the times I was there. And he's looking down upon the supposed place where Jesus lay. And let's look at the next picture. You get to see it. There's this supposed site where Jesus was laid as a mummy on the tomb. They believe that was a slab. Go to the next picture. This, however, is the place where Constantine's mom supposedly found the site, supposedly found a piece or pieces of the true cross right here. One more picture of this. And you can see, so this is where this happened, supposedly. And then you can see the next picture. You have lots of people throughout the centuries. This is my photo, like carving lots of little crosses here. So this was, so as Pontifex Maximus, he did build this church on top. Also, he built another site at Mamre. Let's go to the next picture. This is Mamre. This is my photo. By the way, if you go online, you won't find any pictures of Mamre, so I'm glad I took this photo. And so the Oaks of Mamre. Well, Oaks of Mamre are connected to Abraham, and it was also important to many Jews. And this had been a place of pagan worship. And so he tore this down and rededicated it and created a church here. So you can see that. Okay, thank you. That's good. That's good. So you can see for yourself. Now, let's follow this. So we got 5 churches. I say 5 temples. So it turns out, excuse me, he destroyed the ones connected to Aphrodite. Well, we'll just go here. So, for example, the temples of Aphrodite and Heliopolis and Aphaca were demolished because they permitted, as I said, sacred prostitution, and was deemed morally irreprehensible, right? The temple of Asclepius was another one he destroyed. The reason why, yes, it was a site for the worship of Apollyon and Satiana. However, the main reason was that this god was closely associated with the previous reign of Diocletian. And so it was rationalized as a political reason, that they would say that this is a rallying point for those who are of the family of Diocletian. So yet the controversy, as I said, begins with the destruction of the latter 2 temples. For the temple of Aphrodite and the other temple at Mamre were torn down so that the new church's venerating site could go up. Surely this was a sign of Constantine's attack upon paganism and endorsement of Christianity, and the answer is no. Here, even scholars will often say that maybe he's favoring Christians, but then again, as Pontifex Maximus, he had the right to dispense religious properties as he pleased, because he's in charge of all the religious properties as Pontifex Maximus. In fact, many pagan temples were destroyed by emperors and rebuilt and dedicated to other pagan gods. Like, for example, Elagabalus. He tore down pagan temples dedicated to one deity, and he built on top of it a temple dedicated to another. In fact, Diocletian, the previous emperor, did the same thing. In many ways, this actually was even also business as usual. Emperors just did this. Pontifex Maximus, they tear down temples, dedicate one god, and build one to another. Nothing new here. Now, Constantine emptied temple treasuries and transferred the funds and wealth to finance and adorn his new capital, known as Constantinople, which he founded. But even this action cannot prove he was persecuting pagans, since he simply set the various images of the gods all over his new capital in the Bosphorus, even permitting pagans to rededicate these statues and cult objects in their new setting, often with great pomp and fanfare, especially in one ceremony dedicated to Tyche. This was epically true during the official dedication of Constantinople in 330, where Constantine designated the chariot of the sun god Apollo, but he put in his hand the Christian cross and held it over his head. What? While making this dedication in the marketplace, the Kyrie eleison was sung by those witnessing the event. As for the military and their traditional prayers to the Olympian gods, he simply changed them that they would follow, be more vague, like the ones on Sunday. But interesting is that you go, why is Apollo holding the cross? Oh, that's right, Apollo the sun, Sol Invictus. Oh no, yes, 330. It's still mixed. When Constantine the Great dedicated Constantinople in 330 CE, he had no idea the ramifications for the ancient Mediterranean world. For with the foundation, or refounding, I should say, since the site was currently occupied by the less inspiring city of Byzantium, founded by the Greeks long before, the paradigm of intellectual, religious, political, and cultural history was forever defined. The Greek East received with Constantinople a new cultural center that replaced Athens, merging classical thoughts with Christian sensibilities and with a Christian political core. Let's take a look at some pictures just of Constantine here. So here we go. There's Constantine giving Constantinople. Let's take a look at Constantinople a little bit here. There's a nice image of what he created. This is the Forum of Constantine. So as the chariot of the sun god Apollo was established in the middle of the marketplace with the cross of Christ placed over the god's head before the half-pagan, half-Christian assembly, the observing emperor looking on had no idea how his city truly forged these identities into one. The emperor had considered other sites, for instance, Sirmium and even Troy, which is the windy site of Ilium itself, the setting for the Iliad. Constantine needed a capital that was located between the northern frontier of the Balkans and the eastern frontier of Parthia and Armenia for defense reasons, as well as a city that could be the center of east-west and northeast trade. Constantinople, located on the Bosphorus, on a narrow peninsula between the Aegean and Black Sea, and between the land of the Balkans and Asia Minor, fulfilled that vision exactly. In fact, Constantinople was situated at the juncture of two famous roads, the Via Egnatia, traversing Eastern Europe, and the main road leading from Byzantium through Chalcedon and on to Nicaea. Creating alternative capitals to Rome was not considered insulting, for the Eternal City still maintained its prestige. But since the Emperor Diocletian, it became the habit for the imperial family to establish themselves anywhere but in Rome, and especially in order to avoid all the squabbling nobles and the terribly hot summers. Diocletian had favored Nicomedia in the east, while Maximian liked Milan. Other capitals like Trier for Constantius, the father of Constantine, and later Ravenna were byproducts of this mentality. For Constantine, the city was intended to commemorate his triumph over the rival Eastern Emperor Licinius, whom he defeated in 324, making him the sole emperor, yes, the only emperor of both now the East and the West. So in 324, he set upon laying out the basic outline of the city, and in 5 years' time, the city was complete. According to Socrates Scholasticus, Constantine was to be established by law as an equal to the imperial city, being declared as New Rome, with this proclamation engraved on a pillar of stone erected in public view at a place known as the Stratageum, which is the mansion house in Byzantium, or Constantinople. The ancient city of Byzantium, located at the tip of the peninsula to the Bosphorus, with the Golden Horn to the north and the Sea of Marmara to the south, was reorganized into the imperial district as well as accommodating the hippodrome. The city planners retained the main colonnade running a road, running this older district and so forth. Especially, you're going to have Constantine built the circular forum of Constantine. From here, this road, later called the Mies, split with one part proceeding northwest, past the Church of the Holy Apostles, and onto the new set of walls built by Constantine, while the other went southeast to part of the other walls. So the great accomplishment, you can take this down, thank you so much, Marjorie, is the fact that Constantinople was founded. This is the legacy. We're going to keep going. This is the legacy of Constantine the Great. Okay, so now let's go here. But what about his personal life? Well, his personal life was a mess. In fact, a more definitive measure of the man may be unraveled in his personal life, or at least this is one possible strategy. But here we find a series of inconsistencies and evidence of a person in conflict with the responsibilities expected of a Roman emperor and that of a supposedly a Christian. For Constantine, the sign that was seen at the Milvian Bridge was the all-high God that was inclusive of both Sol Invictus and the Christian God. But he did see himself under divine favor to defeat his rival in the form of Sol Invictus. But I want to say that he was a very superstitious man. Even his legislation regarding magic, divination, and portents between 318 and 320 was all about deflecting bad magic, encouraging good magic, and protecting himself from supernatural forces that may either harm him in perception or in actuality. His concerns regarding reading portents as related to lightning strikes and mandated the city prefects inform immediately. The interpretation reveals up to 320, Constantine's very much influenced by a popular view. The emperor also subscribed to the common Roman belief that the most powerful gods win in battles, and that the weaker gods of weaker nations lose, that the superior god always conquers the inferior gods. In this sense, Constantine was giving the Christian God, as amalgamated with his sun god, an opportunity to reveal his power, rather than simply embrace his vision as a sign to have faith in the Christian God. According to Lactantius, he then commanded that the symbol of the Hiero be placed upon the shields to act as magical amulets to protect his soldiers and to empower them to defeat the enemy. It's just magic again. It's not good Christian theology. It's magic. I have this magic amulet of the sign, and in and of itself will defeat the bad guys. Now, both Constantine's father and mother did have influence in his life. His father, we do have to mention this, was Flavius Constantius, who was born and raised just south of the Danube River in the province of Moesia Superior. And he moved up through the ranks in the military sense of Emperor Aurelian. He fought against the Palmyrene Empire of Queen Zenobie. All the emperors his father served consider him a fine and effective general of the first caliber. In fact, Diocletian had him as part of the Tetrarchy. Now, while Diocletian and Maximian were full emperors, he and Galerius were secondary emperors in their respective areas, that being for Constantius, that was Trier in Germania. Now, I want to say this, I do have quite a bit on this, but I just want to summarize, is that while Diocletian and Maximian will persecute the Christians, Constantius really doesn't want to do it. It's really half-hearted at best, and then he just pretty well says, well, maybe we'll just pick up the, take up the holy books, but don't kill anybody. And that was Constantius. He's a very tolerant individual. Constantius fell in love with a local barmaid or landlady of a tavern by the name of Helena. Naturally, Constantine's enemies would regard Helena as a common prostitute, but how much truth there is in this claim is uncertain. Ambrose said that she was just a good, stable maid. Scholars are uncertain whether Constantius actually married her or simply took her on as a concubine, but together they produced only one child, and that's Constantine. Helena, while Thracian by blood, was probably born in Bithynia. While many sources assert that Helena was actually Jewish, there is no direct evidence for this. But again, what we do know is Helena became a Christian. His mom is a Christian. So, and of course, Constantius, he favored Sol Invictus, just like Constantine, his son. And so both of them, both parents, tended towards monotheism in general, right? Now, Constantius, we go into this. We don't want to go into the minutiae, but of course, Constantius eventually, of course, dies, and Constantine is declared at York in 306 as his replacement. There's a civil war. We have the Milvian Bridge in 312, and so forth. And at this point, though, Constantine's mom, Helena, is officially brought back into public life. And as I said, she did embrace Christianity. She was also declared Augusta as Empress of Rome. So he really did love his mom. She died in 330, and he was right there by her bedside. So love of mom. Probably the most important official mission of his mother as Augusta was her pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 326, where she received a vision supposedly from God that led her to find pieces of the true cross. She was told the true cross resided at the place where the ancient persecutor built the temple of Aphrodite. According to the 4th century Ambrose, 3 crosses were excavated along with the inscription declaring Jesus as King of the Jews, supposedly written by Pontius Pilate. But the problem was now to determine which one of the crosses upon which Jesus was crucified. So the bishop Macarius of Jerusalem supposedly devised a test, placing the sick woman on each of the crosses. While with the first and second cross, she remained as sick as ever. The third one, she was miraculously healed. So there it is. The belief was that the cross itself had mysterious, even magical powers. And so what happens is, that's interesting, that, the cross is hardly ever mentioned, except in a theological sense, but as an image before the time of Constantine. Hardly at all. But what will happen is the cross will become popularized as a symbol after Constantine and because of Mom. Did you guys know that people weren't wearing crosses before this? Because many Christians viewed the cross as like the electric chair. It was a torture implement. Why would you do this? Yes, in theology, they talked about the sacredness of the cross, the importance of it, but they didn't use it as a symbol. What they used as symbols is like lambs and anchors and other things like that. And the Arante symbol, which is a female symbol with the arms raised up, which represents the Holy Spirit, or Sophia. They don't have this cross, but the cross becomes popular as a symbol, as you can imagine, because of Constantine and his mom. You're learning new things. Too many, right? Way too many. Now, of course, maybe Helena's pilgrimage to the Holy Land was in many ways a tactic to deflect attention from his recent domestic mess at the time. In his handling of the situation, Constantine revealed himself as someone who absolutely did not follow any standards of ethics and morality when it comes to Christianity or anything else. So basically, long story short, of course, obviously, he kills his enemies. He does, even after promising not to do so, he will do that. And we'll see this. Another problem, of course, that would be, for example, Licinius too, for example. Another demonstration of Constantine's rather unpredictable character concerned his immediate family. The emperor's wife, Fausta, bore him 3 sons. He's like a basketball player. 3 sons, Constantine II, Constance, and Constantine. Constantine named his kids Constantine II, Constance, and Constantius. Excuse me. Yeah. Wow, it's a lot of cons. But her 3 sons had a rival in his son, Crispus. You see, Crispus was a product of Constantine's first marriage to a certain Minervina. And so she charged him with immortality. Many scholars believe that Constantine was not officially married to Minervina, but was either a concubine or a common law marriage, much like his father had done with his own mother, Helena. As for the charges, only Zosimus in the 5th century and Ioannis Oneris in the 12th century relate the story, saying that Fausta was jealous of Crispus's fame, fearing he was going to be the favored heir of Constantine over her own 3 sons, and so planned a very clever plot to rid him forever. First, Fausta told Crispus that she was in love with him and wished to sleep with him. Taken aback, Crispus immediately left the palace. Next, she told Constantine that Crispus was making advances towards her, that he even tried to ravish her. And so she ordered him out of the palace. That's why he went out. Believing the story, he sent his son Crispus to Pula in present-day Croatia, where he was killed by what was called a cold poison. Right? When he found out that Fausta had lied to him, he had her suffocated while she was taking a bath, making it so hot she lost consciousness. Wow. So does it seem like a Christian man to me? I don't know. Maybe it does. All right. Okay. So even some of Constantine's friends lost their lives due to his occasionally unstable character. So, for example, in 331, while Constantine was living in his new capital, this is an important story, the winds that typically enabled the grain ships to arrive from Alexandria suddenly ceased, and the city began to grow hungry. His close friend, a pagan philosopher by the name of Sopater, he's a close friend and pagan philosopher, was accused by the Praetorian prefect, a certain Albaltus, of using his powers of occult knowledge and magic to actually fetter the winds to prevent the grain from arriving to the city. Constantine, being a superstitious man, ordered Sopater's execution. Albaltus was a Christian, was jealous of Sopater's friendship with the emperor and knew exactly what to do to get his rival killed. Concerning this episode, the writer Eunapius laments, the entire state found misfortune through the murder of one man. Yet, as time progressed, we have still one more big story to talk about, right? As time passed, Constantine seemed to change more and more his behavior, perhaps gradually converting towards maybe a Christian worldview, especially after 326. Of course, Constantine gave to the church generous land grants and so forth. Many churches were adorned with lavish art and refitted for the worshipers. Constantine went into a special chapel built into the palace where, according to Eusebius, every day at a fixed hour, he shut himself up in the most secluded part of the palace, as if to assist at the sacred mysteries, and there commune with God alone, ardently beseeching him on bended knees for his necessities. Apparently, he also read about, by this point, the Bible too. He did value the idea of chastity, but maybe that's because of the mess he got into. But Constantine's conversion, here we go. Here we go. Now, it is not so much on the state side that we can see the results of Constantine's conversion, but rather on the church side of affairs. The Christian community in North Africa, we're leading up to Nicaea, because I promised I'm going to be talking about Nicaea. We got to get there. The Christian community in North Africa was struggling over how one should treat those who were baptized by clergy who had handed over the holy books and images to the Roman authorities during the recent persecutions. While many agreed that the clergy who violated the church in this way were indeed traitors, that's where we get the word from the Latin traditores. Traditores means people who hand things over. Traditores means people who hand things over. That's where we get the word traitors from. So, and what are they handing over? They're handing over the holy books, right? Many worried that their sins also tainted anyone they officially touched in office. For instance, what if somebody who was one of these traitors who handed over the holy books baptized somebody? Maybe their baptism was no good. Or what if they ordained somebody and they did this? Maybe, because through their hands, maybe their ordination was no good. The community appealed. Now, you think the church should appeal to their own bishops, but the bishops didn't know what to do with the situation. So they appealed to Constantine, the emperor, to deal with an internal matter. Why would you do that? They asked him to be the arbitrator. But you know what he did? He says, no, I don't do this. This is not my job. And so he turned it over to the Bishop of Rome. You're the ones who decide whether or not that these people have to be rebaptized or reordained because of these so-called traditores. So, but this, what happens is, now this kind of appeal is not unprecedented. There actually was an appeal of the church. There was this person by the name of Paul Samosata who caused lots of problems in the church, and the church appealed to the pagan Roman Emperor Aurelian and says, can you help us out with this church matter? But anyway, but we won't go there right now. So what happened is the Bishop of Rome says, I don't know what to do. Can you tell us, Constantine? This is a huge mistake. This is a big world history big mistake, because now what you're going to be doing is you're going to give the emperor the power, direct power over the church, more than just Pontifex Maximus. Now you're asking him to deal with church disputes, which they shouldn't be. It should be the bishops who do it. So Constantine redefined the emperor's role within the church when the talks in Rome failed. Suddenly, the emperor had the idea to remedy the situation, and he called an official council of all the bishops to Arles, which is in Gaul, southern France, in the year 314. Now, what they should have done is not show up. Why would they show up? Why would the emperor have any power in this area at all? Sure, he's Pontifex Maximus, but he's wanting everybody to agree to get along. However, without complaint, these bishops, I don't know what's wrong with them, they all came to attend. It even arrived, and it came to a conclusion that those who were touched by the Tratorius clergy were not tainted in any way. For Constantine, order at any cost was the goal, for he wished for the unity of the church. So that means this precedent is created for Constantine to call another council, which is the Council of Nicaea. Yeah, I mean, these people are not smart enough to go along with my decisions, even though it's supposed to be internal matter. Maybe, maybe they'll do it again. So this entire process repeated all over again as a result of a charismatic bishop by the name of Arius, A-R-I-U-S. In general, Arianism, not as an Aryan race, that's a whole other topic. Arianism asserted, which is of Arius of Alexandria, Arianism asserted that since in nature fathers come before sons, then theologically there must have been a time when the Son of God did not exist. Many believed this assumption however, devaluated the Son and made him into the creature of the Creator. Again, this is causing a problem. Constantine tried to negotiate between the opposing parties. Oh, declaring to them, this is his response. He says, this is Constantine, on the subject of divine providence, therefore, let there be one faith among you, one understanding, one agreement about the supreme. The precise details about these minimal disputes amongst yourselves, even if you cannot bring yourselves to a single point of view, ought to remain in mind, guarded in the hidden recesses of thought. What do you mean? He's telling them, just you know what? These are little problems, you know. These are minimal disputes, he says. Minimal disputes. You know, just even if you don't have he says the single point of view. Just be guarded. Don't talk about it. It's not worth fighting about. You think that's gonna work? Don't fight. What do? Fight. Yeah. Perhaps a bit naive. Constantine's letter revealed his determination to create a consensus within the Christian community, no matter what. And when that failed, he knew exactly what to do. He used his authority as the emperor to intervene in church affairs because, hey, they did it once, they'll do it again. This meeting was to be the Great Council of Ankara. Ankara? Well, almost. We do not remember this council because they had a sudden change of location. Constantine discovered that one of his staunchest opponents of Arianism just happened to be a certain Marsilius, who was the bishop of Ankara, who, realizing an agreement could not result in such a hostile environment, the emperor moved the meeting to Nicaea on the coast because the city was also more accessible and had better weather. And also Constantine just happened to have a palace that was located along the lake there. And so he decided this would be a perfect place for him to attend the meeting. So what happens is the meeting went in two places, the church as well as his palace. So his palace was there. I got to tell you this. So the place where the place where Constantine had the Council of Nicaea still exists. It's still there. But let's take a look at the council site. These are my pictures. So take it away, Margie. So, okay, so this is Constantine's palace, located at Iznik, which is, of course, Nicaea in ancient times. This is the side wall of the council chamber where the Council of Nicaea occurred in 325. Let's go to the next picture. I just want you to take a look at the chambers. Yeah, wait, Dr. Rietveld, it's underwater. Yeah, take the next picture. So if you want to go see the council chamber, this is it. I would recommend that you put on your swim trunks and dive in and swim amongst the old. You could actually swim amongst the chamber where this all happened. Go to the next image. There it is. They got to watch out for Turkish kids doing cannonballs as you swim the old council chamber because it can get pretty rough. They like to dive off that side wall. Go to the next image. But after all, I mean, it's still the site. Next picture. I just think it's pretty funny that the site of the Council of Nicaea that's so famous is just completely forgotten and underwater. Take a look at the next image. Yeah, there it is. You want to excavate it? Underwater archaeology, anybody? Next picture, last picture. You can see kind of a fragment. Yeah, there it is. Okay, thanks. Just sitting there. and the pictures. Thank you. So that's the site of the Council of Nicaea. You see it now, right? What do you think? All right. So, are we having fun yet? So, what did the Council of Nicaea decide? We're going to go there. It decided a lot of things you didn't know it decided. A lot of things you thought it decided. It didn't decide those. So there it is. So the primary, of course, reason for the Council of Nicaea in 325 was to come to a decision about a belief system, as I know, named Arianism, named after his follower, Arius. But who was Arius? First of all, Arius was a very logical man. He loved to talk and often fell into absurd discourses for its sheer entertainment value. Arius loved controversy. He was just totally into it. Arius was a presbyter of Alexandria and a friend of Alexander, who was the bishop of Alexandria. So yeah, he's stuck with the title Alexander of Alexandria. How's that for the title? Now, Alexander of Alexandria highly valued Arius's knowledge, he was almost the bishop's right-hand man. Some say Arius was jealous of Alexander and was envious of his position. If this was true, we don't know for sure. So how did this controversy begin? Well, Alexander held meetings of all the presbyters and clergy of Alexandria. And Alexander wrote a treatise that he's quite proud of, entitled The Unity of the Trinity. In this work, he tried to explain the theological mystery with perhaps a little bit too much minuteness. So, as they used to do, typically would do, Arius would take on the opposite viewpoint. Alexander took the other viewpoint, and they went back and forth. Alexander liked free discourse, even on doubtful topics. So Arius went on, playing his role as displaying the contrary opinion. He was a contrarian, especially concerning the unity of the Trinity. But he talked about the unity of the Trinity. He seemed really convincing, very convinced in the mannerisms. And after a while, Alexander's going, wow, you really do this really well, playing the devil's advocate. Wait, you don't really believe this, do you? Arius said, if the Father gave birth to the Son, he that was given birth had a beginning of existence. And from this, it is evident that there was a time when the Son was not. Therefore, it necessarily follows that he, the Son, had his substance from nothing. Arius went on to affirm the Son of God was merely a creature of the Creator, or a created being, since he had a birth. Also, the Son had free will and was capable of both vice as well as virtue. Alexander hoped to persuade rather than force Arius from his view, but then he refused and began preaching his views, making up the famous dictum, "Hey, pote ote ukein," which means there was a time when he was not. In fact, Ein pote ote ukein, actually, he made this into a song, and everybody sang the song in his where he was at. You just can't make this up. So Arius would sing his song. Many of his parishioners were women, because the men were out on Sundays casting their nets. They were fishermen, and they're all singing this song. And then what happened is that then when they come home and they hear their wives singing the song, then they start singing this song about this theology too. And then they, as they're fishing, are singing the song, and they're spread to other fishermen. And all of a sudden, this belief system spreads through popular culture all throughout the entire Mediterranean. It became the common view. Well, this becomes a problem. So Eusebius wrote Alexander to accept. I gotta mention, there's also a certain Eusebius of Nicaea, not to be confused with historian Eusebius, who also became a zealous defender of the doctrines of Arius. And Eusebius wrote Alexander to accept Arius. Constantine the Great was greatly grieved. Christians began to become a source of ridicule in the theaters. Constantine stated that, quote, idle, useless talk of leisure occasioned this controversy. He says it is careless to bring these thoughts to the public. Subsequently, Constantine made it forbidden to discuss these topics, but it didn't work. Eventually, it became clear that the doctrines of Arius had to be addressed officially in the great meeting, as he mentioned. I mentioned the Council of Nicaea in 325. This is the first great council of the church. Here, 318 bishops gathered to discuss church doctrine and also were there to create a creed in wake of the Arian controversy that would define the central elements of the Christian faith. These weren't just any men. They were those who had suffered through horrendous persecutions during the time of Diocletian. And so they would look pretty bloody looking. They're missing arms and eyes and so forth. Before the council, the disputants engaged in logical contests before the multitudes, and many were attracted to these discourses during that time. Sacrifices were made before the images of Jesus Christ, as well as others. He told them, Constantine told him, Christ and his disciples did not teach us in dialectics, art, nor vain subtleties, but with the simplest, which preserved by faith and good works. So the session was to be taking place, as I mentioned, at the central hall of the imperial palace, as well as the main church of Nicaea. But the one of course, the palace is right by the lake. When the emperor arrived, he refused to sit until the bishop said he could, and then he sat on a low stool. Yet while acting with all humility, Constantine was covered head to toe in gold, as well as covered in precious stones, looking very much like a sovereign from the East, a sacred guise created by the earlier emperor Diocletian, right? He was adorned as the Pontifex Maximus, as head of the Roman religion. Now, what he did is all petitions made against each other, he actually burned in front of them all, saying, Christ enjoins him who is anxious to obtain forgiveness to forgive his brother. He addressed them mildly in Greek, but he exhorted harmony. He was also supporting liberally everybody in the council. And so he didn't decide anything. He just sat there. And then at the time, he wasn't even there. And they finally agreed to the creed, which, of course, since this is a talk that includes the Council of Nicaea, I will have to mention the creed, but you'll see why. The creed goes as follows. We believe, it says, in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things, visible and invisible, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten of the Father, that is, of the substance, ektes ousia, substance in Greek, of the Father, God of gods, light of light, true God of true God, begotten, not made, of the same substance, ousia, right, with the Father, homoousian, tu patre, through whom all things were made in heaven and earth, who for us men and our salvation descended, was incarnate and was made man, and suffered and rose again on the third day, ascended to heaven and cometh to judge the living and the dead, and in the Holy Spirit. Those who say there was a time when he was not, and he was not before he was begotten, and he was made out of nothing, ek uk oton, or who maintain that he is of another hypostasis or another substance than the Father, or that the Son of God is created or mutable or subject to change, then the Catholic Church anathematizes. So that is basically it. There it is. The Nicene Creed. This is important historically. So this is another, but he didn't do it. He just presided at the council that made a decision. The bishops decided it. He didn't do it. He just sat there, right? But however, the Nicene Creed is one of the few standards of faith that the majority of Christian denominations, Catholic, Orthodox, and many Protestants agree upon today. The bishops especially use the Gospel of John to support their case. For instance, John 10:30, I and the Father are one, and John 17:21, that they all may be one, as you the Father are in me, and I in you, and they also may be one, that the world may believe that you have sent me. Now, after the creed was made, Eusebius of Nicomedia and 4 others refused to sign because the term homoousios, which means of the same substance, was a problem. And so they were exiled along with Arius. Constantine himself wished to make sure that the controversial word homoousios, despite its possibilities, was inserted into the Nicene Creed. This is his problem. The Council of Nicaea did more than that. It did not decide the books of the Bible. But I'm looking at it right here. But there's many new laws that are still important. They're called canons. It included the establishment of a minimum term for people studying for baptism, the need for the ordination of bishops to include at least 3 bishops from that respective province and to be confirmed by a metropolitan bishop, and of course the recognized authority of the patriarchs of Rome and Alexandria. However, you're here to hear some unusual ones, aren't you? Some rather unusual rules included the prohibition of self-castration. You can no longer castrate yourself. That's because Origen of Alexandria castrated himself, and that led to connected to Origenism. There is also the prohibition of a younger lady staying in the house of a cleric. So a young lady can no longer stay in the house of a cleric, and so making his activities seem suspicious when he is alone with her. So you can't have that. The prohibition of usury amongst the clergy. Now, this is interesting. The prohibition of kneeling and mandating of standing during Sunday gatherings in the church. Prayer in church was to be made while standing up. So no kneeling, none of this kneeling stuff. When you're praying, you're supposed to be standing up with your arms raised. Wait a second, but today in the church, they're all praying. Yeah, well, guess what? That was not the early church. Other business included deciding upon the date for Easter. Here it is. Agreeing to have it fall on the first Sunday after the first full spring moon. This is when the church completely, at this point, mandated against Passover. Did you know that much of the church in the East still followed the Jewish Passover feast? And it was considered Orthodox. It's a Council of Nicaea, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, that decided upon this. It also, that's a problem. And of course, early Christians, these are called quatrodecimists. They got themselves in trouble for various reasons, but there you have it. There's other bits and pieces. I just want to kind of gather these. I actually have all the canons even outlined here. I don't want to go through them all, but I can see for the most part. I don't see. Sundays are to be celebrated, not Saturdays. So again, the Council of Nicaea moved from Jewish practice of celebrating on the Sabbath to Sundays. Moved from Jewish practice celebration of the Passover to Easter now for the whole church. I see this as problematic. I don't agree with this. I think that sure, you can celebrate Easter, but I don't like the idea of mandating that. The Council of Nicaea also decided that no more agape feasts at home. Churches are now to be in a public structure, and so this is another big change because typically, people, throughout the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century, people met at home to celebrate. So, in that case, I think that the Council of Nicaea is a big bummer. But there you have it. So you're thinking, okay, so the Council of Nicaea decided all these things. Yeah. So I know I got to wrap up. I do want to wrap up. So what happens? Oh, we do have sensational stories. I know you're going to be asking me these questions, so I'm anticipating it. So the Bible was not decided with the Council of Nicaea. I know I hear this question coming. No, it was not. Okay, did they go over any of the books of the Bible? No, although there is a reference by Jerome that they were talking about Judith a little bit, but that was it, which is not part of the canon. So, but Constantine did commission at a certain point various Bibles to be published, but we don't know the contents of those books at all, so that doesn't count. So, in fact, we do have tangible Bibles. The first tangible Bibles that we have, complete Bibles, that are from the 4th century, and during or after his lifetime, you have the Codex Sinaiticus. So the books of the Bible are there. However, it also adds the Shepherd of Hermas as part of the Bible to the scriptures, as well as the Gospel of Barnabas. So there you go. You do have the Vaticanus, which does not include 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus, although somebody later on pushed it in there and kind of broke the binding of it. So, but anyway, Constantine did commission 50 Bibles, but we don't know the content. So when do we get the very first authoritative list of the Bible books? Not the Council of Nicaea, not in 325. I'm answering your question because I know you want to ask this one. It's at 367. In the year 367, so not 325, 367, all the books are finally decided as by a list by a Athanasius of Alexandria, the Bishop of Alexandria. He makes this list, which is basically the books of the Bible today. However, he adds, and I'll quote him, "But for the sake of greater accuracy, I add, being constrained to write, that there are also other books besides these, which have not indeed been put in the canon, but have been appointed by the fathers as reading materials for those who have just come forward, and which are to be instructed in the doctrine of piety." And he lists them. So these are books he says should still be read, even though they're not part of the canon. The Wisdom of Solomon, the Wisdom of Sirach, Esther, Judith, Tobias, the Teachings or the Didache of the Apostles, which is right, and the Shepherd Hermas. And although beloved, the former are in the canon, and the latter serve as reading materials. All right, so the Council of Nicaea is done. Towards the conclusion, the Council of Nicaea, Constantine hosted a lavish celebration. And at the closing party, he gave each participant of the council an expensive gift. At the end, he asked the bishops to return for one more session to be established a few days later. At this final session, Constantine told them that they must keep the peace amongst themselves at all costs, that unity was the most important goal, whatever the cost. He asked them to keep him in their prayers. Finally, he sent them back to the diocese. So what happened? Okay, you do want to hear this part of the story. What happened? This is still the reign of Constantine. It falls apart. Huh? I thought the Council of Nicaea continued on. No. It stopped? Wow. It resumes again in 381. What do you mean it stops? Wait, and Constantine's part of this? Yeah. Well, I haven't heard this story. Of course you haven't. You want to hear this, and then we'll conclude. So, Arianism came back. See, first of all, Constantine weakened his views concerning the Nicene position. 3 years later, in the year 328, Eusebius of Nicaea and the other exiled bishops were allowed to return. At once, they began to make intrigues against the Nicene party. They made sure to visit the emperor quite often, and so via this method gain his confidence. They said they wanted to go to Jerusalem to see his mighty edifices, the great buildings he built in the name of Christianity, and that, of course, being the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right, as one of them, and the Marmary building as the other. And he was flattered, and of course, Bethlehem, right? And he was flattered and sent them off in royal manner. On their way, this embassy that included Eusebius of Nicaea stopped at the great city of Antioch, where he deposed the Nicene faithful bishop there by the name of Eustathius in 330. What Eusebius did was to bribe a prostitute to say that her baby was conceived through an affair with Eustathius, thereby tarnishing his very upright reputation as the bishop of Antioch. And so Eusebius of Nicaea installed his own pro-Arian bishop at this metropolis. The prostitute, by the way, later recanted her deception when she was really sick, but it was too late, you know. Meanwhile, Athanasius, the guy who decided the books of the Bible later on, Athanasius became Bishop of Alexandria after Alexander of Alexandria. Don't get tired of saying that. The Arians feared this very fierce pro-Nicene bishop and bribed someone to accuse him of levying a tax upon Egypt in order to usurp imperial power for himself. Of course, Athanasius was found innocent, but the Arians were determined and went directly to the emperor to accuse him of other crimes that are too outrageous to say, wanting to lure him to Caesarea in Palestine for a council. Constantine decided that convening a council at Tyre would be fair for the case. At Tyre, the Arians pushed forward a woman of questionable background who accused Athanasius of defiling her chastity, but then proceeded to point out the wrong guy in court. He's the guy. Oops, that's not him. Oops. Next, Athanasius was accused of murder, an idea which really started to convince everyone. That is until the murdered guy showed up alive and well in court. Oops. When the accusations of carousing and murder failed, the next natural course was accuse Athanasius of practicing black magic, using his evil incantations to bewitch and control people. Finally, they said how Athanasius threatened to prevent the exportation of wheat from Alexandria to the very dependent capital of Constantinople. Well, this struck a nerve, and Constantine's like, wait, don't cut off the grain supply to our capital. And yes, Athanasius was exiled, banished to Trier in Germania in 336. Now Arius was rehabilitated. Eusebius of Nicaea encouraged Constantine to call Arius to the capital. Therefore, before the emperor, Arius swore to orthodoxy. Next, the followers of Eusebius wished to bring Arius officially into the church as a symbol to all of his newly returned communication with the church. Nobody knows the story. Now the head bishop of Constantinople, Alexander, absolutely refused to let Arius in, but the party of Arius said they would be back the very next day with force to ensure that Arius would be reinstalled. Alexander was still said to have prayed to God to take him or Arius with him. Arius now was suddenly emboldened by his supporters, began to make a series of speeches against the Nicene party. Suddenly, he felt compelled by a call of nature to retire, and according to ancient reports, fell headlong and burst himself asunder in the midst of doing his business. Wow. Why don't I just read you what happened? Socrates Scholasticus from the 4th century writes, "It was then Saturday, and going out of the imperial palace, attended by a crowd of Eusebian partisans like guards, he, Arius, paraded proudly through the midst of the city, attracting the notice of all the people. And he approached the place called Constantine's Forum, where the column of periphery is erected. And suddenly a terror arising from the remorse of conscience seized Arius, and with the terror, a violent relaxation of the bowels. He therefore inquired whether there was a convenient place near, and being directed to the back of Constantine's Forum, he hastened thither. Soon after a faintness came over him, and together with the evacuation, his bowels protruded, followed by a copious hemorrhage and the descent of the small intestines. Moreover, portions of his spleen and liver were brought off in the effusion of blood, so that he almost immediately died. The scene of this catastrophe is still shown in Constantinople, as I have said, behind the shambles of the colonnade, and by persons going by, pointing the finger at the place. There is a perpetual remembrance preserved of this extraordinary kind of death. So that was the end of Arius. So we're almost finishing Constantine. Eventually, Constantine calls Athanasius back from exile in 337. He only has one more year left of his life. So he calls Athanasius back. One of the emperor's last acts, however, since he dies the very year, and he's replaced by his three sons, Constantius, Constans, and Constantine. It is on his deathbed that Constantine is finally baptized as a Christian, not before. So technically, right? So his three sons take over. Constantius became ruler of the Roman East, and he ruled from Constantinople, declares himself for the Arian faith, and only was held back to impose his beliefs on the whole empire by his brother Constans, who ruled from the west. And he was an ardent follower of the Nicene faith. In 339, Eusebius of Nicaea became bishop of Constantinople. And as you may have guessed, Athanasius is exiled again, but flees to Rome for help. Meanwhile, at the Council of Antioch, the term homoousios was avoided. You see where this is going. When Constans dies in 350, Constantius becomes the sole emperor, and therefore the Nicene Creed is expunged, and the official belief system of the Roman Empire for Christianity, that is, not for the other things, becomes, of course, Arianism. That's the one that's accused of, so that's the one that's supported. And now, under Constantius, Arian Christians will now attack Nicene Christians to the point where Alexandria is full of blood running through the gutters. Christians killing Christians? That was pretty quick. I know. And then by the time of the infamous Council of Sirmium in 357, there are already, Arianism already had split into three different factions. You have the similar party, you have the similar party, and you have the like party. And so they're split up. And then, of course, what happens is that in 359, officially, the Nicene Council is condemned. We do have a record of that. Jerome says as follows. Jerome says, at that moment, the term ousia was abolished. The Nicene faith stood condemned by acclamation. The whole world groaned and was astonished to find itself Arian, unquote. He also says, he said that the bishops were caught up in the snares of Arminium. He says, we thought, said they, the words were to be taken in their natural meaning, and we had no suspicion that in the church of God, the very home of simplicity and sincerity, in the confession of the truth, one thing could be kept secret in the heart, another uttered by the lips. We thought too well of bad men and were deceived. We did not suppose that the bishops of Christ were fighting against Christ. So the word ousia was condemned. Whoa, so wait. So and then that means that the missionaries, when they went out from the Roman Empire, they converted the barbarians to Arianism. That's why they're Arian, the barbarians, because the Roman Empire at that time was Arian. So how does it stop being Arian? Well, it stops, and I won't tell you that whole story, but there will be those known as the three Cappadocians, Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus. He come up with a defense, and so what will happen is their theology helps win the day, slowly but surely, and eventually the Arian crowd who are fighting amongst themselves and killing Nicene Christians, they eventually become pretty unpopular. And that's a real complicated story. Better for another day. But I will just sum up and say, in 381, at the Council of Constantinople, under the auspices of Gregory of Nazianzus, one of the three Cappadocians, Arianism is expunged again. And so basically between 328 to 381, Arianism is back and eventually takes over in 359. You learned too much tonight. So what about Constantine? Let's conclude things. Let's wrap things up. One more thing, but we're over. And that is, Constantine also creates a major church, the Church of the Holy Apostles, in Constantinople. He fills it up with all these relics. In many ways, he's making Constantinople the new Jerusalem. And he wants to have relics from all of the 12 apostles. Then he organized, actually, he designed a tomb for himself as the 13th apostle. And so the idea was he would be buried amongst the 12 apostles. Obviously, this idea comes towards the end of his life. It's a gradual change. The Church of the Holy Apostles, it was destroyed. It was torn down in 1453. The Ottoman Turks offered the church to the Patriarch of Constantinople, since they were now claiming Hagia Sophia. But the Patriarch Gennadius Scholarius found the ruined church of the apostles unsuitable to his needs, and he wished to have the church of Pamacharistos as his official seat. And so they basically just they tore it down. It was a magnificent church that is gone. It's torn down. And they built in its place the famous Fete Mosque. However, in 2001, they started doing excavations, and they uncovered a large rectangular structure that appears to be near the vicinity where Constantine's mausoleum was located. And we found a few other things. Actually, I've seen pieces or portions of it. But there you have it. There were relics that were located there, relics of Timothy, relics of Luke, and Andrew. But the rest, they never were able to gather the other relics. But still, Constantine made Constantinople in many ways into the ideal of the new Jerusalem. And of course, the idea is, therefore, it became believed that the Roman Empire itself will be the new Israel. You can see where this is going. And this is very much part of the rhetoric of the Eastern Roman Empire after the West falls, and of course, Byzantium. But when it comes to Constantine himself, we have learned quite a bit, covered quite a bit. Oh, man. But we have taken down quite a few of the legends, of the stories, of the mythology. We are still left with a character who is gradually embracing what he thinks or interprets as the Christian faith. But really, I would have to say for the first part of his reign, and even to the second part of his reign, his beliefs are still an amalgamation of his earlier allegiance to Sol Invictus. And you can see that even with the founding of Constantinople, as late as 330, you still have that. Now, having read the early church fathers, they get all enthusiastic about his piety and everything else towards the faith. But by looking at the actual records, the evidence itself, a lot of it is just simply rhetoric, bombastic displays of enthusiasm, where Constantine is mostly focused upon utilizing Christianity in order to help support his greater purpose, and that is the unity of the empire under himself. He's seeing Christianity grow to such an extent that there's no way to avoid it. There's no way persecutions are going to stop this. Not that he's thinking that, but he's thinking there's got to be some way to bring it together. Even at the course Council of Arles, even at the Council of Nicaea, his focus is on unity, unity, unity. I'm hoping that these Christians are going to bring unity to the empire, because all they've seen before this is disunity. And you can see that in many cases, he's kind of sweating it out. He's going, wow, you guys are fighting. You guys don't like it, like each other very much. Fortunately, during the reign of Constantine, there is not bloodbaths of Christians against Christians. And fortunately, during Constantine, there's no persecution of pagans or people who are not Christians. It looks like that during his reign, Christians and Jews and others got along, or at least tolerated one another, and you have some semblance of peace amongst them. Sure, you got bishops going back and forth with Arianism and so forth, but nothing compared to what happens afterwards. When he dies under Constantius, once his brother Constance is out of the way, I have a coin of Constance. I forgot to bring it here. I guess, sorry. But what happens is once that, it's crazy. You're going to have the movement of persecution. And I think it's interesting because you have, under Diocletian, you have Christians persecuting. Sorry, under Diocletian, you have pagans persecuting Christians. Under Constantine, you have the end of persecutions. Under Constantius, now you have Christians persecuting Christians, right? Christians persecuting Christians. And this continues. And then what happens is when we finally get to Theodosius, it will become now Christians starting in 380 and 81, 81 and 82. It will become Christians persecuting pagans. Got it? Christians persecuting pagans. So, and what's the key here? How about church and state? Religion needs to be separate from the state, from governance. This is what I believe very strongly. There needs to be a division between church and state. Of course, I will say also the Pontifex Maximus is a very powerful position. And what will happen eventually is the Pontifex Maximus, when the Western Roman Emperor, last one, Romulus Augustulus, dies, that form of that position of Pontifex Maximus, it transitions over to the papacy. And so therefore the Pope becomes the Pontifex Maximus, becomes the pontiff. And that is coming right from the imperial system. And of course, this is why the church is the West. That's why it is called the Roman Catholic Church. Catholicus. You guys got it? So the legacy of Constantine is that, as well as, of course, Constantinople. The preservation, of course, Constantinople preserves ancient knowledge. And so that when it falls in 1453, that knowledge goes to the Renaissance and spurs on the Renaissance and the modern world. So we do have to thank Constantine for that purpose. Constantinople proved to be a smart gamble because its location was not so vulnerable as Rome was. And of course, the eastern part of the Roman Empire turned out to be stronger. It survived while the Roman Empire in the West fell in 476. In 1453, the eastern end fell. But all that knowledge from antiquity and all those philosophies were then became a gift to the West again. And so we owe Constantine, in that sense, a great debt. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you learned a lot. I am done. Ta-da.